In the brutal world of World War II, women were captured and imprisoned, forced into lives they never imagined. Yet, within the walls of the enemy's prison camps, these women found something far stronger than physical freedom. They found their will to resist, fighting for freedom. POW Women Who Took a Stand tells the untold stories of women who fought back against their captors in ways the enemy never expected. They resisted not with weapons, but with courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable bond of sisterhood. From the cold, dark barracks to the unforgiving conditions of the prison camp, these women turned captivity into a battleground for their very survival. They formed a silent resistance that inspired others to join their fight for freedom. Their bravery against unimaginable odds will inspire you. This is a story of the women who refused to be broken, who fought for each other, and for the hope of freedom. Join us as we uncover the stories of these resilient and brave women who stood tall in the face of adversity and never gave up. Through their courage, they became a force of change during one of history's darkest times. Their struggle was not just for survival. It was for freedom, for justice, and for the lives of those who came after them. It was a time of unimaginable darkness, the world gripped by the fury of war. The ground trembled with the march of soldiers. The skies echoed with the roar of bombs, and the air carried the scent of fear and desperation. Yet, within the confines of the enemy's prison camps, where the screams of the wounded blended with the harsh commands of the guards, there were women who had once lived lives of peace, love, and hope now, caught in the brutal reality of war. Their bodies were confined by barbed wire, their spirits tested by hunger, disease, and the relentless march of time. But their hearts, their courage, and their will to survive were anything but bound. These women would not just endure, they would rise, they would resist, and they would fight for their freedom. Yet, what happened next changed everything. These women, who had once been overlooked, would now become the backbone of the resistance, taking a stand in ways that no one expected, their bravery setting a fire that would spread across the camp and beyond. In the cold, sterile silence of the prison camp, the days blurred into one another, a never-ending cycle of hunger, exhaustion, and the looming shadow of death. Yet, amid the barracks, the locked gates, and the watchful eyes of the guards, a quiet defiance began to take root. These women, who had been captured and torn from their homes, knew that the battle was not over. The enemy thought they had broken them, thought that captivity would erase their will to fight. Yet the women who stood there in the shadows of the camp refused to accept this fate. They refused to be forgotten, to be Selens, to be mere footnotes in the annals of war. They were warriors, they were mothers, they were daughters, and they had been forced into a fight that would push them to the very limits of their endurance. Yet they never imagined this moment would reshape their destiny, that in the darkest hours of their captivity, they would discover a power that would not only keep them alive but make them a force the enemy could not ignore. The sound of boots on gravel, the sharp crack of a whip, and the constant hum of the enemy's war machine could be heard all around them. Yet amidst the chaos, these women found strength in one another, forming an unspoken bond, a sisterhood that transcended the walls of their prison. They shared what little food they had, whispered words of hope in the darkness, and stood together against the brutal realities of their imprisonment. They had been captured, but they had not been conquered. They had been broken, but their spirits remained unshaken. They were prisoners, but they refused to be passive. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no reinforcements. But what they did have was each other, their determination, and a fierce belief that no matter the odds, they could still take a stand. And then something no one expected, they began to resist, to fight back in ways the enemy had never anticipated. In the face of unimaginable hardship, they turned their captivity into a battleground, each woman becoming a soldier in her own right. The cold wind whipped through the camp, carrying with it the scent of smoke and destruction. The guards patrolled the fences, their boots crunching on the frozen ground, while the women inside the camp whispered plans, exchanged stolen glances, and prepared for the moment when they would make their move. They had no weapons, no ammunition, but they had their wits, their courage, and their resolve. And through small acts of defiance, from sabotaging the enemy's supplies to stealing food for their fellow prisoners, they began to chip away at the foundations of their captors' control. The guards thought they were safe, thought they were in control, but behind the walls of the camp, a secret resistance was growing. Behind these ruins, A secret waited, a secret that would soon shift the balance of power within the camp and spark a chain of events that would lead to their eventual liberation. The women were no longer just surviving, they were fighting. Fighting for their dignity, for their freedom, for the right to live without the constant threat of death hanging over their heads. The smallest act of rebellion, sneaking messages to the outside world, passing along information to other prisoners, and defying orders became a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. The prisoners watched in awe as the women took a stand, as they became symbols of defiance and courage. Their actions spoke louder than words, their silent resistance echoing through the camp. What they discovered next would shake even their captors. These women were not just surviving, they were fighting for something greater. Their resistance had become a movement, one that would not only change the course of their lives, but the lives of those who would come after them. Each day, they risked everything, facing the wrath of their captors, enduring the constant threat of punishment. Yet they never faltered. The strength of their resistance grew, as did their resolve. They had become a force to be reckoned with. And even as the enemy tightened their grip, these women continued to resist. They found ways to communicate with the outside world, to send messages of hope, to inspire those who were still free. They became the voice of the oppressed, the warriors who fought not with weapons, but with their hearts and minds. The enemy thought they had broken the women, but they had underestimated them. These women, who had been reduced to prisoners, had become the very backbone of the resistance. They had found a way to take a stand, to fight for their freedom, and in doing so, they became a symbol of the unbreakable will of the human spirit. The days passed, the months stretched on, but the women never stopped fighting. Their resistance continued to grow, and their story spread beyond the walls of the camp. The enemy began to realize that they could no longer control these women, that their strength had become a force beyond their reach. The women had taken a stand, and they would not be moved. Their fight was not just for survival, it was for freedom, for dignity, for the future of those who would come after them. They had been prisoners, but now they were warriors. And when the moment finally arrived, when the camp gates were opened and the world outside came rushing in, these women emerged not as victims, but as victors. They had fought for their freedom and had earned it. Their bravery, their resilience, and their unbreakable will had made them the true heroes of the war. The war eventually ended, but the story of the women who took a stand in captivity would never be forgotten. They had endured the worst, but they had never given up. Their courage had inspired a generation, and their legacy would live on, passed down through the years, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a spark of resistance, always a chance to fight for what is right. These women, who had once been prisoners, had become the heroes of their own story, their bravery and resilience an eternal symbol of the power of the human spirit. And as the world moved on, their story remained a testament to the unbreakable strength of the women who fought not just for survival, but for freedom, for dignity, and for a future worth living.